there is something deeply human about our need for control. From the moment we are children, we're taught that effort leads to reward, that hard work changes outcomes, and that if we just hold on tightly enough, we can shape life to our will. So, when something begins to slip, a relationship, a dream, a part of our identity, we don't instinctively let it go. We grip harder. We rationalize, bargain, and push through. We tell ourselves that perseverance is the path to redemption, that letting go means we didn't try hard enough, care deeply enough, or love fully enough. We equate surrender with failure. This is the illusion. Holding on feels noble, but sometimes it is merely a mask for fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of change, fear of loss. It gives us the false comfort that if we can just keep all the pieces in place, we won't have to feel the pain of the unknown. We fear that if we release our grip, we'll spiral, we'll break, we'll disappear. So instead, we overstay in situations that have long expired. We silence our intuition and cling to a version of life that no longer reflects who we are. It's easy to convince ourselves that this kind of holding on is strength. But true strength often lies in the opposite. In releasing the need to control outcomes, in trusting that life knows more than we do in the moment. When we're in the grip of control, we often miss the bigger picture. We stay in relationships where love has faded. We fight for jobs that drain us. We chase dreams that once fit us, but now feel like cages. We tell ourselves that if we just do more, try harder, love better, things will go back to how they used to be. But what we fail to realize is that sometimes what we're holding on to is not what's meant to stay. It was right for a season, a chapter, a version of who we once were. Yet we fear that letting go will make us lose meaning, lose identity, lose worth. So we create stories about why it's right, why we must keep going, why giving up is not an option. These stories become our walls, and even as we suffer inside them, we refuse to stop building them. Because control, even painful control, feels safer than surrender. And still we hold on, because the illusion is strong, and because facing the truth that holding on may seem like an act of strength, but over time, it begins to take a quiet, devastating toll on our emotional well-being. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow erosion, like water steadily carving through rock. At first, it looks like fatigue, a heaviness in your chest that lingers even after rest, a dull ache behind your smile. You go through the motions, pretending everything is fine, but deep inside, you know something is off. You feel disconnected from the people around you, from the passions that once lit you up, and most painfully, from yourself. When we refuse to let go of what no longer aligns with who we are, we begin to carry the emotional weight of resistance. We resist change, resist endings, resist the truth that whispers to us in quiet moments that this isn't working anymore, and that resistance consumes energy. It demands emotional labor every single day just to hold things together. You find yourself justifying things that shouldn't need explaining, making excuses for pain that should never have become normal, tolerating patterns that chip away at your spirit bit by bit. There is grief in this kind of clinging, though we rarely name it as such. It's the grief of who we used to be, who we hope to become, and who we are now, stuck in between. You might find yourself grieving not just what you've lost, but what you continue to lose by staying: peace of mind, self-respect, joy, and the sense of freedom that comes from living in alignment with your truth. But instead of honoring that grief, we often suppress it, bury it under distractions, responsibilities, or toxic positivity. We tell ourselves it's just a phase, that things will get better, that we can fix it if we just try a little harder. And so we carry on, emotionally exhausted, spiritually depleted, and unable to recognize how much we're sacrificing to avoid the pain of letting go. Clinging also isolates us, because we're so consumed by keeping things from falling apart. We stop sharing what we really feel. We minimize our pain to others, afraid that speaking it out loud will force us to confront it. So we smile, nod, say, "I'm fine," even when we're breaking inside. We start to feel alone, even in a room full of people. The more we bury our truth, the more disconnected we become from those around us and from the authentic self we're slowly abandoning for the sake of preservation. In truth, the cost of clinging goes beyond emotional fatigue. It distorts our sense of worth. We start to internalize the dysfunction around us, believing that maybe we're the problem, that our unhappiness is a personal flaw rather than a reflection of misalignment. This belief keeps us stuck in cycles of self-doubt and guilt. We question our instincts. We silence our needs. We become more invested in maintaining appearances than in honoring. There comes a point when life stops waiting for us to make the change we're too afraid to make. It's patient for a while. It gives us gentle nudges, a lingering discomfort, a missed opportunity, a quiet feeling that something is off. But when we ignore those signs long enough, life grows louder. What begins as a whisper can turn into a crash. That's what happened to me. I ignored the signs, justified the pain, and convinced myself that things would improve with time. I thought I could endure just a little longer. I believed that loyalty, persistence, and faith would be enough to turn everything around. But life has its own wisdom. It sees when we're stuck in places we've outgrown. It notices when our soul is suffocating under the weight of what we refuse to release. And when we refuse to let go voluntarily, it sometimes removes what we cling to, no matter how much we protest. In my case, life didn't just ask me to let go. It ripped what I was holding out of my hands. It ended relationships I thought would last forever. It closed doors I wasn't ready to walk away from. It forced endings I wasn't emotionally prepared for. At the time, it felt like betrayal, like punishment. I was confused, angry, heartbroken, certain that everything was crumbling beyond repair. But what I didn't understand then was that life wasn't trying to destroy me. It was trying to redirect me, was protecting me from a future that no longer aligned with who I was becoming. I just couldn't see it from where I stood, still attached to the past, still mourning what was, still desperate to go back to something familiar. That's the hardest part, when the thing you've been holding becomes the very thing that's holding you back, and you still don't feel ready to let go. But life doesn't always wait for readiness. Sometimes it has to break the illusion for you. When life intervenes, it often doesn't feel like grace. It feels like chaos. Your world gets flipped and you're forced to sit in the rubble of what you thought was stable. You question everything. Your choices, your worth, your strength. You feel powerless. But within that unraveling, something deeper is happening. The parts of you that were hidden, the parts that longed for freedom, for change, for peace, begin to rise. Because when everything falls apart, what's true can finally come to the surface. Life's interventions are rarely gentle, but they are always purposeful. They show up not to harm us, but to wake us, to shake us free from patterns that were silently killing our joy, to remind us that we were never meant to carry certain burdens as long as we have. Reaching a breaking point is not a sudden collapse. It's the result of accumulated strain, a buildup of emotional pressure that has gone unacknowledged for far too long. It's the point where your internal world can no longer tolerate the weight you've been carrying. For weeks, months, sometimes even years, you've been telling yourself to keep going. You've convinced yourself that the pain is temporary, that you're strong enough to handle it, that walking away would mean giving up. But little by little, that inner strength you once relied on becomes stretched too thin. You stop recognizing yourself. You begin reacting instead of responding. Your patience wears down. You cry in silence, sometimes for no reason you can name. You wake up tired, not just physically, but emotionally, as though your soul is drained from the effort of pretending everything is okay. The smile you wear becomes a mask. The joy you once felt is replaced with numbness. You find yourself avoiding mirrors, conversations, and moments of stillness because deep down, you know those quiet moments will bring you face to face with the truth you've been avoiding. Then it happens. That moment you can't take it anymore. Maybe it's triggered by something small, a careless word, a cancelled plan, another empty promise. Or maybe it's something big: betrayal, loss, failure. But it's not really about the trigger. It's about everything that came before it. That moment is the final crack in the dam. The flood of suppressed emotion breaks through, and you're left standing in the wreckage of your own denial. And here's what's so jarring about the breaking point. It's both painful and illuminating. There's agony in realizing that you've stayed in something too long, that you've compromised parts of yourself just to keep the peace or preserve the illusion of stability. There's grief in seeing how much you've sacrificed. Your time, your energy, your emotional safety, all in the name of holding on. But alongside that pain comes a rare, fierce clarity. For the first time in a long time, you see things for what they are, not what you hoped they could be. The illusions fall away. The rationalizations lose their power. You stop asking, "What if I try harder?" and start wondering, "What would happen if I stopped trying at all?" This clarity is not comfortable. In fact, it can feel like standing at the edge of a cliff with no parachute, staring into the unknown. But what it gives you is honesty, unfiltered, raw, and deeply necessary. It reveals truths you weren't ready to admit, that love isn't enough when it costs you yourself, that hope can become a trap when it keeps you chained to suffering. And that strength isn't in enduring pain forever. It's in knowing when to say, no more. At the breaking point, you realize that survival alone is not the goal. You begin to crave something deeper: peace, authenticity, self-respect. And while the path ahead may still be, letting go doesn't just involve walking away from a situation or a person. It involves unraveling the identity that was built around that attachment, the life you knew, the routines you followed, the beliefs you held about who you were. All of it begins to dissolve. And with that dissolution comes a deep, sometimes disorienting sense of loss. Because when you release something or someone that once defined you, you're left with a space that feels vast, unfamiliar, and empty. It's not just a chapter ending. It's the tearing down of a framework you once used to navigate the world. In this space, you don't quite know who you are. You're no longer the person who stayed. But you're not yet the person who has fully moved on. It's a liminal state, a kind of emotional and spiritual in-between. And while that can be unsettling, it's also profoundly fertile. It's where you begin again, not by rushing to rebuild your life as it was, but by asking honest, sometimes painful questions. Who am I now? What do I actually want? What kind of life aligns with the person I'm becoming? This stage of identity rebuilding is both quiet and intense. You start to notice the pieces of yourself you abandoned along the way. Passions that were shelved, values that were compromised, boundaries that were blurred. You begin to mourn not only what you let go of, but the version of you that tolerated it. There may be guilt, even shame, as you confront how long you stayed, how many red flags you ignored, how much of yourself you silenced just to maintain what was familiar. But there is also grace in this process, because with each uncomfortable realization, you gain clarity, not about who you were, but about who you no longer want to be. Rebuilding identity means no longer outsourcing your worth to people or roles that made you feel valuable only when you performed, pleased, or sacrificed. It means reclaiming your voice, not the one shaped by expectations, but the one that speaks your truth, even when it's shaky and uncertain. You start to draw boundaries where there used to be none. You speak up in ways you never did before. You learn to sit with discomfort instead of running back to what broke you. And as you do, your sense of self begins to solidify, not around external validation, but around internal alignment. This is not a linear process. There are setbacks, days when you miss what you let go of, not because it was right, but because it was familiar. Moments when you question whether the pain of becoming is worth it. But over time, small wins begin to emerge. Moments when you choose yourself, when you listen to your intuition, when you say no without apology. And each of these becomes a brick in the foundation of your new identity. One built not. Perhaps the most daunting part of letting go is what follows: the stillness. The vast, quiet space that emerges once the noise of chaos settles and the familiar patterns have been broken. It's a silence that feels hollow at first, echoing with doubts and fears. You no longer have the safety net of the past to fall back on, and the future hasn't arrived yet with its promises. This in-between is uncomfortable, vulnerable, and often terrifying. And yet, it's here, in this fragile and uncertain space, that the deepest transformation begins to take root. Trusting the unseen doesn't come naturally, especially after being hurt, after feeling like everything you've built has been dismantled, after questioning your own judgment. The instinct is to reach back toward what's known, even if it caused pain, just to feel grounded again. But growth doesn't happen by returning. It happens by standing still in the uncertainty and choosing to believe that this empty space is not a void. It's a womb, a space of quiet gestation where new truths, new dreams, and a new self are being formed. This kind of trust isn't loud. It doesn't always come with epiphanies or dramatic signs. It's quiet, subtle. It shows up in moments when you feel like falling apart, but instead choose to breathe. It lives in the decision to rest instead of chase, to listen instead of react, to wait instead of force. It's the kind of trust that whispers, "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just have to stay open." That's the power of trusting the unseen. It teaches you to release your grip on needing proof before moving forward. It teaches you to lean into the mystery of becoming, even when you don't yet see where it's leading. There's also a deep humility that comes with this trust. A realization that you are not always in control, and that maybe that's not a bad thing. Life is bigger than our plans, wiser than our preferences, and more complex than our timelines. What you think you're losing may actually be clearing the way for something you never could have imagined. But you don't get to see that at first. You have to walk through the fog, take uncertain steps, and allow yourself to be guided not by certainty, but by alignment. That quiet inner knowing that something within you has shifted, and you can't go back to who you were before. In this space, trust becomes an act of daily courage. It's waking up and choosing to believe that peace is possible, even if it hasn't arrived yet. It's believing that the universe, or God, or life itself is not working against you. It's working through you. Every loss, every tear, every broken expectation is part of a larger unfolding that your heart may not yet understand, but your soul can begin to sense. And in learning to trust that unseen force,